jurisdiction and the equal protection of the laws. Based on these two statements, it's hard to see how ending an unborn human's life could be considered constitutional. Thus, the judges were obliged to do two things. They had to make an argument for why unborn life did not deserve to be treated as a life covered by these statements, and they had to find other constitutional statements that gave a woman the power to end this life. Prior Supreme Court decisions had established a right to contraceptive use by married couples in Griswold versus Connecticut, and later by single people in Eisenstadt versus Barr, based on this so-called right to privacy. A phrase, by the way, that when previously documented in the Constitution was related to the right to own private property. The court then extrapolated that abortion, being a method of birth control, again, even though it's not a method of contraception because it occurs after conception, that abortion should be covered by a woman's right to privacy or ownership of the fetus, even though, of course, the baby is not really part of the body. The court professed ignorance about when life begins and advanced an argument based on personhood instead. Justice Blackmun stated, "We need not resolve the difficult question of when life begins. When those trained in the respective disciplines of medicine, philosophy, and theology are unable to arrive at a consensus, the judiciary at this point in the development of advanced knowledge is not in a position to speculate." Well, that sounds real good, but this was a feigned ignorance. Because even then, an unborn human was known to be clearly alive by the time the pregnancy was recognized, and that's 5 to 7 days after fertilization. However, some scientists debated whether life really begins at conception, or fertilization or implantation. A period of a few days. Disagreement. The court claimed that this non-consensus allowed them to basically approve abortion on demand without any restrictions until birth. So in other words, they're twisting their words again as usual. By doing so, the court actually took a side on the question of when life begins and gave it the most extreme definition possible, not until live birth. Inexplicably, the court also twisted the statement about liberty by applying it to the woman while denying it to the unborn human. They stated that liberty means a right to privacy, which is broad enough to encompass the decision to terminate an unborn child's life. And again, they were stretching, they were ideologically predisposed to come to that, and they had to basically make up something to make it happen. Well, let's go back again. I always like to go to the Founding Fathers. What did they say about abortion? Would they have claimed that it's one of the constitutional rights not listed specifically? Well, many today claim that it was a non-issue, not discussed, so we don't really know. That's totally wrong. First, abortion was a crime under the common law, which is recognized as the basis of laws in civilized nations, and which was incorporated in the Constitution through our 7th Amendment. The 7th Amendment says, "It suits a common law where the value and controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court in the United States than according to the rules of the common law." Of course, common law was based on natural revelation and special or biblical revelation from God. The laws of nature and the laws of nature's God is affirmed in the Declaration of Independence. Sir William Blackstone, who was a favorite authority of the founders, wrote concerning British common law, "Life is the immediate gift of God, a right inherent by nature in every individual, and it begins in contemplation of law as soon as an infant is able to stir in the mother's womb. For a woman, if a woman is quick with child and by a potion or otherwise kills it in her womb, or if anyone beat her whereby the child dies in her body, and she's delivered of a dead child, This was by the ancient law homicide or manslaughter. And after America separated from Great Britain, they continued the same position on abortion. James Wilson, who was a signer of both the Declaration and the Constitution, and was one of the original Supreme Court justices, he said to his law students, obviously he taught law, with consistency, beautiful and undeviating, the human life from its commencement to its close is protected by the common law. In the contemplations of law, life begins with when the infant is first able to stir in the womb. By the law, that life is protected. Notice the same terminology that Blackstone used of stirring in the womb. In those days, due to a lack of our technology that we have, that was the first time a woman really knew for certain that she was pregnant. Of course, had Wilson and the founders had access to discoveries of modern biology, they certainly would have agreed that life begins at conception. Similarly, in early law in Virginia stated, but if a woman be with child, and any gives her a potion to destroy the child within her, this is murder. For it was not given to her to cure a disease, but unlawfully to destroy the child within her. So clearly the founding fathers knew of and disapproved of abortion, and they certainly did not incorporate any such right into the Constitution. Well, what about moral arguments for or against abortion? Pro-abortion activists insist their stance is moral because a woman has a right to control her own body. Of course, this falls flat when you realize the baby is not part of the woman in any way. Also, there are some religious groups that claim a moral right for abortion, but they have no biblical justification for their claims. The Bible clearly talks of the baby in the womb as being a human being. Scripture states that man is made in the image of God. That's Genesis 1:27. This view is supported by various verses expressing tenderness from God towards the unborn baby. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. That's Jeremiah 1:15, or 1:5, excuse me. Another one, for you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. That's Psalm 119. The Bible in other places sets punishments for killing a baby in the womb. So clearly it's an immoral act. So what about scientific and medical data? When does life begin according to science? Is a fetus a human life? Well, from a scientific perspective, this is not a controversial question either. The term fetus, from a Latin word meaning offspring or baby, is a medical term that refers to a human being in the prenatal stage of development in the womb. Life is commonly defined by scientists as organisms that maintain homeostasis, are composed of cells, have a life cycle, undergo metabolism, can grow, adapt to their environment, respond to stimuli, reproduce and evolve. These are all uncontrovertible properties of the fetus. So when does a fetus become alive? Again, scientifically, there's not much controversy here either. Any basic physiology book will confirm that with fertilization, a complete chromosomal complement of 46 human chromosomes results, uniquely different from that of either parent. And the one-celled embryo begins dividing rapidly and growing rapidly. There is no other point in the gestation period that you could possibly say that the fetus has transformed from non-life to life. So life begins at conception. So constitutionally, historically, scientifically, abortion is wrong. So why are we allowing it? Just because 5 unelected people in black robes say it's okay? Is that how a republic is supposed to work? I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it. Our Constitution gave no such power to the courts. We have acquiesced to the lie that the Supreme Court makes the final decision on everything. It's time to overturn the horrors of abortion through our elected representatives. It's their job, not the courts, to make law and to protect the unborn. Even the language from Roe v. Wade acknowledged that if it ever is shown that life begins at conception, then Roe v. Wade is overturned. The ruling stated, the appellee and certain amici argue that the fetus is a person within the language and meaning of the 14th Amendment. In support of this, they outline at length and in detail the well-known facts of fetal development. If this suggestion of personhood is established, the appellant's case, of course, collapses, for the fetus's right to life would then be guaranteed specifically by the amendment. So the court even gave an out for us to prove that life begins at conception. In my opinion, a life at conception bill is the best way to overturn Roe v. Wade. There's been one introduced in Congress by Senator Rand Paul, but of course with the makeup of Congress today, I think he actually introduced it several years ago. It just goes nowhere. So it's up to our state legislature to act. Currently, as Wayne said, there is a bill before our General Assembly called the Fetal Heartbeat Bill. It's HB 0077, which would prevent abortions once a heartbeat is detected, which is usually around 21 days. So it's pretty early in the pregnancy. Of course, it makes perfect sense. If there's a heartbeat, there's life. I mean, who can question that? This is a good first step, but in my opinion, falls short of totally eliminating abortions. It would still allow those early abortions and so-called morning after abortion pills. And if you think about what's going to prevent an abortionist from putting wax in his ears and saying, I don't hear a heartbeat, and going ahead and aborting the baby. If life begins at conception, why are we allowing even those early abortions? However, given the Republican reluctance to make a stand, the heartbeat bill will have to do for this year. It will go a long way. So I encourage each of you to write your all our representatives at the State House, senators. I've talked with Ken Calfee, and he's actually a co-sponsor for the bill. Lowell Russell is on board with it. He's not a co-sponsor, but he says he supports it. Senator McNally told us in a meeting this couple months ago that he would totally support a bill like that. So there's a lot of momentum going. So we need to make sure it passes this year. Of course, the left will challenge it in the courts, and hopefully that will lead to an overthrow of Roe v. Wade at the Supreme Court level. But even if it doesn't, our state government should reject any opinions of the courts that tries to continue the Holocaust of abortion. So what can you do? Actually, tomorrow in the Public Health Subcommittee, they're going to vote to get it out of the subcommittee to send it to the full committee. It's made up of, I think, 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats. I've written all of them. I'd encourage you to go to the website, and it's real easy. Just click on that Health Committee, and then it'll show a subcommittee. You click on that, it'll show all the members. You can click on each one, and email each one of them. But I encourage you tonight or tomorrow morning to go ahead and send out some emails and encourage them to vote. Mostly it's expected to pass that subcommittee, but the more they hear from us, the better it's going to be. And then as it goes to the full committee, it goes to the House floor and the Senate floor, we need to continue pressing to make this happen. So, any questions or comments?
I understand the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
You wish, right?
Yeah, I understand that she acknowledged many years ago that Roe versus Wade was wrongfully decided legally.
Yeah, I mean, there's no real grounds for their decision. I mean, it was totally made up, totally bogus. But the sad part is we continue to acquiesce as a nation and just continue to let it happen. Yeah.
I would like to thank you for your time and presenting in this segment. One of the highlights of this meeting, I think, is your segment on this. I want to thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it.
ruling in New York, if you have heard, I'm sure if you research it might have done. But what happens if a baby is killed in the mother's womb, say 9th month, in an automobile accident by a drunken driver? How have they resolved that?
There's already been a case where a guy beat up his girlfriend, killed the 9-month-old baby in the womb, and the state attorney general said, I cannot prosecute for murder or manslaughter because of this new bill. So that's where this is going.
Well, excuse me, but I think what he said is couldn't prosecute for.
Well, for two murders, because he murdered the girlfriend.
For one.
Yeah, he murdered the girlfriend.
Yeah.
So he's prosecuting for her murder, but not for the baby.
Yeah, right.
Are your notes in a form that it could be emailed?
Yes, but I post them on our website. Every talk that I've given is on our website. There's a segment called Constitution Corner. If you click on that, it's got every single talk I've ever done on there. So, and I'll post this in the next couple of days.
I think that in Oklahoma, they are trying to get a bill that would basically say abortion is murder.
That'd be great. Yeah, a little bit more about what's going on in the legislature. They do have two bills. One is the bill for the heartbeat. The other one is life given conception. And talking with the legislator that is actually putting that bill out, he came to the Tennessee Alliance and gave us a great presentation on it. They believe they can get the heartbeat bill passed this time. If they tried to run both bills at the same time, it would neither one of them would get out of committee. So they're decided they do one bill, that's the heartbeat bill. Next year, they're going to try to do the other bill, but at least we'll have something on the books that will help the end. So that can I have my...
Can I take some?
My agenda. I want to make sure I get things going right. And talking about that, one of the things is Bob is really doing a lot of work to take a bill with a group. There's actually going to be a group that keeps track of who votes for and against different bills, and they're going to have a selection of bills that are very important that they're going to do. And they will keep track. They will also say whether or not they're for or against it and why. As soon as I get with Bob and that starts coming out, they haven't published anything yet, that will be a link on the website also. I'm going to try and modify the website to be able to have a section where you go to for different information and links that you can click on to look at bills, committees, those kind of things. So as I get going on that, we'll have those on the website. So go visit it, and as I get it done, we'll do that. Okay, we have our guest speaker, Ashley Fletcher, is here. He's worked in a lot of different capacities, but one of the things that he is very interested in is EMP. And I'll let him talk about what EMP is. I'm not going to do it. But when I was flying B-52 many years ago, we worried about that back then. So this is something that's not new, but the Chinese have a missile that can go into the atmosphere, and they don't have to have a re-entry vehicle to make this happen. And so with that, Ashley is one of our founding members. He's been here for quite a while. He comes to a lot of our meetings, so I'll turn it over to Ashley.
Thank you, Wayne. And I'm flattered that we've got so many people here on such a horrible night.
Yeah.
I want to preface my remarks by saying one thing. Wayne was very kind in calling me an expert on EMP, and I will accept the moniker that I know a fair amount about EMP, but I'm going to pass on the expert. There could be an astronomer or astrologer in the audience tonight that could blow me away. But anyway, just curiously, how many people know about electromagnetic pulse? Could I have a show of hands, please? Oh, that's great. That's a big help. For those of you who don't, an EMP is merely, it's a very powerful electromagnetic burst that's charged full of particles and electrons and whatnot. And it's almost like the strike of lightning times a million. And there are two types. There are man-made electromagnetic pulses, and there are natural electromagnetic pulses. And I think, and we, by the way, the Earth, we've been hit by both. We've been hit by natural and EMP. And I'll allude to that in a little bit. But in order to help you understand the natural EMP, which is a little more complicated, I've spent a lot of money on some expensive props. You have to know a little bit about the Earth and the Sun, and that'll help you immensely. Keep in mind that the Earth is nothing more than a solid rock. And it's, if you cut the Earth in the middle, if you sliced it, there is a huge lake of molten iron and nickel. And it's 5,500 degrees in temperature. And it's constantly boiling and roiling. And I'm going to wish now that I had 3 hands. Okay. You can hold the mic. Okay. And because that molten river of iron and nickel is constantly moving, it's causing magnetic fields of flux. So you have magnetic north, and every year magnetic north moves about 9.5 miles. Well, for some reason, and this has got the scientists baffled, last year, instead of moving 9.5 miles, magnetic north moved 35.3 miles. And that's got scientists a little bit worried. You also have to know that the Earth is 93 million miles away from the Sun. We'll explain that in a minute. Another thing with the Earth, if a policeman goes out on duty, he or she puts on a Kevlar vest, and that becomes their shield. The Earth also has a shield. It's called a magnetosphere. And it hovers, if the microphone was Earth, this magnetic shield hovers about 60 to 135 miles above the Earth. And what its function is, it stops debris coming down. Meteors, electromagnetic pulses that are weak. It acts as a wonderful shield. In a minute we're going to get into the Sun. Now keep in mind that the Sun is 380,000 times larger than the Earth. And the core of the Sun, we said the core of the Earth is 5,500 degrees. The core of the Sun is 15 million degrees. So it is a super cauldron of hydrogen and helium. And about 1,100 to 1,200 times a year, the Sun emits something called a solar flare. Now, that solar flare can go off in this direction, that direction, or down towards Earth. Well, there's 3 unusual things happening right now. You have the highly increased movement of magnetic north. You have a weakening of the magnetic shield, because we're transitioning, and I won't get into why, but we're transitioning with the Sun. You have a lot of increased solar activity. And NASA predicts that we have a 12% chance of being hit with an electromagnetic pulse within the next decade. Now that includes nuclear and man-made, but the odds of man-made, the odds of a natural pulse are a lot greater than the nuclear. The beauty of being hit by a natural electromagnetic pulse is that at any given point in time, there's tens of thousands of astronomers looking at the sun, and they know when a solar flare comes off the sun. They know how big it is, they know what direction it is. But when that solar flare comes off, it's traveling at over 1 million miles an hour, and it's creating a tremendous wind. And occasionally, a solar flare will come down, electromagnetic pulse from the sun, and it'll burst through this magnetosphere, because it's so powerful it goes right through. The biggest one that happened to us was September 1st, 1859. There was an event called the Carrington event. It was a tremendous electromagnetic pulse. And back then, we didn't have the grid work that we have now. The only thing we had that connected us were teletype machines and telegraph machines. It was such an event. It was a planetary event. People that were using a teletype machine with metal keys, the keys literally burned the tips of their fingers. Teletype machines burned up. The cable that was running underneath the ocean across to Europe fried. It hit Europe, it hit the United States, it hit Canada, it hit Mexico, and I think maybe Australia. If that event happened in this day and age, the damage would have been 1 million times worse than what it was back then because of our grid work. I'm going to have you put that slide on in a minute. The beauty of a natural EMP is that it would take 4 days and 8 hours for a natural EMP to come from the sun down here. Now, that may seem slow, but to go 93 million miles an hour in 4 days and 8 hours, that's about as fast as Pandora Vreeland used to drive that Dukes of Hazzard mobile. But the other beauty of that is that we will have a warning.
Yeah, there you go.
We would have a warning, and what would happen is they would shut the grids down. And NASA could tell us that at 3 o'clock Saturday morning, an electromagnetic pulse is going to hit from Virginia on up to Canada. So they would shut all of those grids down and hopefully mitigate the damage. If it was a nuclear strike with an EMP, you wouldn't have that opportunity. It would happen instantaneously. If, just as an example, if we had an EMP right at this very moment, the first thing that would happen would be the lights would go out. You would probably get on your cell phone and call your neighbor to see if the lights went out at your house, and you'd notice that your cell phone didn't work. Wayne would call the meeting to a halt. We'd go out to our car, we'd take our key fobs, and we wouldn't be able to open our car. Once we got our car open with a key, you turn the ignition and the car wouldn't start, so all of us would be walking home. And the reason for that is a car has 50 to 100 microchips in it. And when an EMP hits an automobile, it's about 800,000 volts, and it fries everything. A place where you wouldn't want to be is in an airplane, because you would head down. You wouldn't have control tower. You wouldn't have any instruments. You wouldn't have any communication. You also wouldn't want to be in an elevator in New York City. In a subway, if you were in a car in a desert and you had to walk several days, you would be toast. Life support system in a hospital, there would be backup generation, but there would only be backup generation for about 2 weeks. Once they ran out of fuel for the generators, everybody on life support would go. People dependent upon keeping diabetic medicine refrigerated would be in trouble, because keep in mind, you wouldn't have toilets, you wouldn't have water, you wouldn't have refrigeration. Grocery markets would be empty of shelves within 2 days. It would be a mess. Wayne, can we have... just a couple of things. In July 9th, 1962, Russia decided to test an explosion up over Kazakhstan. And the result was they blew out 90,000 people. They blew the grid out for 90,000 people. So the United States, also in July 1962, blew an a missile up over the Pacific Ocean near Hawaii. And they didn't know it, but they blew out 5 satellites, including Telstar and a Russian satellite. And 1,490 miles away, they blew out a bunch of communication equipment in Hawaii. So they all of a sudden they realized what a mess it would be. In the United States, we have, this is an extra high voltage transformer. We have 2,008 of those across the country. And they're all connected together so they would act like a giant receiving antenna. So if we got hit with a nuclear electromagnetic pulse in 9 of the northeastern extra high voltage transformers, it would knock out 75% of the United States. 243 million people would be without power. Now the bad thing is, there's only 2 countries in the world that make these transformers, and every single one of them is custom made. Germany makes them, and South Korea makes them. It takes 18 months to make one extra high voltage transformer. So you can imagine the devastation that would happen if we lost them.
Actually, excuse
Yes.
me, could you get that set on the slide, the big slide, blow it all the way up?
I don't know.
Yeah, I can.
And it's hit slideshow up at the top there.
I don't think I can, but I'll try.
Wayne's a high-tech expert.
The other bad thing, by the way, is we have 108 nuclear power plants. If we got hit with an EMP, and keep in mind that Watts Bar is 40 miles away, what would happen is Watts Bar would go down. They have backup cooling tower capability for about 2 weeks. Once they ran out of fuel, and keep in mind, you can't go get fuel because you can't drive a vehicle and you can't pump gas. All of a sudden the cooling pond would heat up, the rods would heat up, they'd catch fire, and we would be looking at a nuclear cloud. So if the wind was blowing this way, that wouldn't be a very good sight either. I can't do it, I'm sorry, Jeff. Now the other thing you have to know is 30 countries have nuclear EMP capability, including Russia, China, possibly North Korea, certainly Iran, and Russia and China have nuclear EMP in their war plans. The United States has gotten a hold of their war plans, and I'm sure that we do too. The other thing you need to know, and this is going to be the maddening thing, we could harden the grid so easily, it's unbelievable. Russia and China have already hardened their grid, so if we decided to attack them with an electromagnetic pulse, it wouldn't faze them a bit. And to tell you how easy it is, you could literally put an explosive device in a weather balloon and send it up 18 miles and remotely detonate it and knock out the grid somewhere in the United States. You can do it from a Scud missile, from a freighter, certainly a nuclear missile, a satellite. It's a mess. In case you're wondering what you can't see, we've all driven by these big transformer facilities, and that's all they're trying to blow up is an extra high voltage transformer. I shouldn't use the term blow up, should I? Here's the maddening thing, and here's one of the reasons I'm here tonight. You wonder why we haven't hardened the grid. We've known for 50 years. In fact, there you go. There you go.
I told you Wayne's a guy.
We have known for 50 years how dangerous EMP is. In fact, Susan Gingrich's brother, Duke, has been trying to get Congress and the Senate to do something. Here's the problem. You've got two organizations. You've got the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is called FERC, and you've got the National Energy Reliability Corporation, which is NERC. FERC is a federal agency. NERC is a PAC. It's like frick and frack, only this is FERC and NERC. What happens is these two organizations are parasitically joined at the hip. They're there to help each other. And the way NERC works, the PAC, is all these utilities give them tens of millions of dollars a year that they dole out to congressmen and senators. And as an example, Carolina Power and Light will say, you know, we want to make more money with our electricity. So they will take $150,000 and go to their senators and their congressmen and put this in their war chest and say, do us a favor and go to the FERC and tell them we need a rate hike. So they're screwing the customers and they're making themselves fat. And then you say, who is responsible for hardening the grid? And I'm going to make you mad, and I'm going to ask you a question. How much money do you think we give to Pakistan every year, a country that hates us? Does anybody know? $2 billion.
Enough to build a wall.
Would you like to take a guess at how much it would cost to harden the grid of the entire United States? $2 billion. The same amount of money that we write a check to Pakistan, we could mitigate this entire situation that we've got. And what happens is, and they've had 50 Senate hearings on this, and they all realize how dangerous it is. Somebody will say, it's the Department of Human Services job. Somebody says, no, it's the Department of Defense job. The Department of Defense says, no, it's FEMA's job. FEMA says, no, it's the state's job to harden their own grid. Well, what happens is, I'm happy to say that 14 states have already hardened their grids, or in the process of hardening their grids. We have a unique situation here in Tennessee because the federal government owns the TVA. And I called the TVA. And I asked them what we were doing. I called the Director of Communications at Dr. I said, what are we doing to harden the grid here in Tennessee? And he just talked around me. He said, what we're doing is every time a piece of equipment goes down, we put a piece of equipment in that hardens the grid. And all they're doing is doing little Band-Aids operations. So it's a mess. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you 3 books to read. I was going to do a presentation tonight on how we can protect ourselves from the grid. But what I'd like to do is, if you want me to come back, I'm willing to do another session, and I'll bring a solar oven, I'll bring a solar stove, I'll bring a solar generator, and I'll bring some stuff and show you what you can do. And I'll try and make a list of everything you can do certainly one of the first things you need to do is get a whole bunch of water, a whole bunch of toilet paper. You need to get a bunch of food that's going to last for 25 years or so. But there are three books that are great to read. Ironically, one of the books, Susan Gingrich's brother, he was responsible for this book coming out. It's called 1 Second After by William Forster. You read it? Good. Newt Gingrich used to collaborate with William Forster on Civil War books. And during one of their collaborative sessions, Newt said to William, "Have you ever heard of Electro Magnetic Pulse?" And William said, "Yes, I have." He said, "I was in the military for 20 years. And Newt said, "You should write a book about that." And that's the book that your brother...
Very scary.
Very scary. There's another book called EMP Survival by Larry and Cheryl Poole. That's a good read. And there's a third book, and this is written by the foremost leading authority in the United States, Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, called Blackout Wars. And you only have to read 26 pages of this book, and it'll tell you the devastation. It's a lot more serious than you probably think it is. I will entertain questions if anybody has any.
Question. Yes. Solar generators.
Yes.
A generator with a battery powered by solar panels. Will that resist an EMP?
Good question. I have a solar generator. I have to take, the solar generator is about this big. I put it in a Faraday bag, which is a bag that is resilient to electromagnetic pulse. The solar panels I leave out. Solar panels are fine. But you need to put stuff in what they call a Faraday cage.
We got another question? I met William Forster in North Carolina a couple of years ago. Basically, he said if an EMP from the sun happens, which would be a big one, you'd probably have 90% of the population go away in less than a year. But you mentioned pole shifts early on. And as drastic as EMPs would be, I wonder if a pole shift couldn't actually even be worse. And you can go to mountain ranges and stuff, and they can prove that thousands of years ago they were underwater. You can go to islands and find stone formations where the stone isn't even on that island, but it might be 2,000 miles away on a different continent. And it doesn't make sense to somebody today, but do you think things like that could have happened during a past pole shift of the Earth?
Yeah, good question. What he's talking about, is, again, if this was the Earth, the magnetic pole, it moves. Now, once every 150,000 to 200,000 years, there is a polar shift in which magnetic north becomes south. You would go to Canada to get warm, and you go to Florida to cool off. So it has happened throughout history. We could make it through. It would screw up agriculture and be difficult, but we could make it through a polar shift. The good thing is, it'll be about another 130,000 years before that happens, so we don't have to worry about it. One thing I forgot to mention, the sun, the Earth, rotates around the sun, and it takes 365 days to do that. We talked about the Carrington effect. On July 12, 2012, 7 years ago, we, the United States, missed being hit by one of the biggest EMPs, natural, bigger than the Carrington effect. We missed it by 1 day. If you can picture a clock with 365 units on it. On July 23rd, the Earth moved 1 day And on July 22nd, an EMP hit. We missed it by 1 degree out of 365 days, 1 day. So it can happen. Any more questions?
We got a question back here
Yep.
first.
Yes, Jim?
Ashley, I had considered getting a backup generator, and you've answered the question about you would get gasoline after a few days. Let me ask you about natural gas. Since it's pumped, et cetera, that probably interrupted also?
I don't know. I would think it would be. What I've done, I have an 1100 watt solar generator. I've hooked that up to 3 12 volt 100 amp deep cycle batteries that gives me another 1800 amps. So I have 3000 watts. I have enough power to run lights, to run a small refrigerator, to keep a bunch of stuff going. So.
What's your address?
Wait, hold on, I got one more question.
Yeah, I do have a question. To blow out all this electronics, does it have to have a circuit? I mean, say you're working on your car, you got your battery disconnected, EMP hits. You put the battery wire back on, is your car gonna work?
No. Ironically, the automobiles that would make it, any automobile built before 1980, if you had a 1934, you could go out here, you could go out and start and run and nothing would ever happen. Yes, it is. Yes, Teresa.
You mentioned about being able to run your refrigerator, but your refrigerator's got all kinds of electronics in it now too. So would it even run?
I think the best thing to do is, you wouldn't want to run your big refrigerator. And just so you know, you only have to run your refrigerator 15 minutes of every hour. I would advise getting one of these small executive refrigerators, leave it unplugged. If you think it might get hit with an EMP, you could wrap it in aluminum foil until we got hit. If push comes to shove, I would put my stuff in this small executive refrigerator. It only burns about, I don't know, 80 or 90 watts or something, or less than that. And your freezer, you only have to run a freezer 1 hour a day, 24, to keep stuff frozen. So.
Would survival be okay? I mean, would it be good to survive?
The question is, would it be good to survive? And I think, I don't mean to be sarcastic, but I think it depends upon how well prepared you are. If you're well prepared, if you have a wood stove, if you can keep warm. If you don't have a wood stove, you don't have food, you don't have water, you might as well say, c'est la vie. You've got me by 10 years. I'll be 78 tomorrow.
That's a good point.
Any other one?
Ashley,
Yes, Jim.
I had an interesting thing happen to me last year. I went to buy some new gun safes.
Yep.
And of course, the modern trend is to get an electronic lock on the front of the safe. And it was brought to my attention that if we have an EMP, I won't be able to get to my goodies to protect myself. So apparently last year, they just came out with EMP, or in your terminology, hardened electronic locks for your safe.
Yep.
So if you do happen to have one of these things to protect your goodies, you might want to try and see about getting it updated to a hardened electronic lock.
That is an excellent idea, Jim, because you would not be able to get into it. It fries a bunch of stuff. Anything else? Any other questions?
Hey, Wayne,
Yeah.
you mentioned the 25-year food supply. It's very good. But I would suggest everybody get you some ham radios, because communication is going to be very, very important. I've got a couple of ham walkie-talkies. They don't get out very far. They get out a few miles, but it's better than nothing. But when they're cheap, as far as a ham license to operate them, yeah, you need that. But if an EMP hits, that means the stuff's hit the fan. Forget about the license. Get you some ham radios so you can communicate with people all around you or in a distance.
That is an excellent point.
I have to have me Faraday cage built for my video.
You can buy a small handheld ham radio for about $60, and it'll probably go out 15 or 20 miles, but at least you can keep. And if I'm able to come back again another time and help you prepare, really what you want to do as far as a neighbor goes is 4 or 5 of you want to get together, and hopefully you've got a neighbor that knows a lot about ammunition and guns, and maybe you've got a neighbor that's a nurse, a neighbor that's good at building stuff. But you need to be guarding yourself 24/7, because what's going to happen is, if we get hit with an EMP, the cops aren't going to be around. There are going to be looters. The first thing that's going to happen is the drug addicts are going to go into every pharmacy they can find and take every opioid they can get. People are going to be going into Dick's Sporting Goods or every gun store, grabbing all the guns and ammunition. And then after that, they're going to start going into people's houses. Now the good news is, they're going to hit the expensive houses first. The houses on the lake, like the Vreeland house, would be a good. They're probably going to hit Knoxville. They're probably going to hit Knoxville first.
All I can say is good luck.
I know that Jim and Pandora are very well armed. The good thing is they've got the lake on one side. So, but you really, seriously, you should get together, and you're going to need to have a situation where somebody is standing guard 24/7, because if they know you've got food, if they know you've got water, if they know you've got something they want, you will be looted.
Another question.
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, Bob mentioned Faraday cage. The greatest Faraday cage that's cheap is just buy the old aluminum trash cans that we all grew up with a good tight seal on the lid. Throw your walkie-talkies, your weather radios, anything you think you're going to want in that trash. First, line it with cardboard on the sides and the bottom. Put your electronics in there, put your lid on there good and tight, and if you want to be doubly safe, maybe buy some of that aluminum tape that they'll sell at Home Depot or something, and wrap that lid around the can, and that will protect you from, what I understand, will protect you from a very bad EMP hit.
That is an excellent point, and there's also a company called Tech Protect, and I'll bring them the next time I come. They make bags. The bags almost look like they're made out of aluminum, and they come in big sizes, and you can also put your stuff in that. You could literally take a cell phone, put it in a microwave oven, and turn the microwave on and watch the cell phone cook, and it wouldn't turn on. You can take a Tech Protect bag, take another cell phone, put it in the microwave, turn it on, run it for 3 minutes, pull it out, turn it on, and it works fine. So,
and one of the things these books, if you read these books, they'll teach you, there were 7 meals from anarchy, which means people will go about 2.5 days before they're going to want to take something you got, because they got to feed their kids, they're starving, and it gets very inhospitable pretty darn quick.
you are absolutely correct.
Well, it might be best.
Any other questions? Sir. Yes, sir.
How directional are the nuclear EMPs? Will they cover the whole country or just portions of it?
Okay, another good question. Keep in mind that you could put a nuclear weapon in a satellite, and when that certain weapon hits, when that satellite hits exactly where you want to go, you can detonate it. Envision, the best way to explain it is, envision a flashlight. If I had a flashlight and I was shining the flashlight on the wall, the beam would be very small. But as I walk away from the wall, the larger that beam would get. And that's the same idea as a nuclear EMP. The higher you go in the atmosphere, the bigger that cone of destruction is. Now, there's a trade-off. If you go too high, then you weaken the EMP pulse, so you don't do as much damage. But you can be very, very directional. If you wanted to knock out, if China wanted to knock out the 9 northeast EHV transformers, which would wipe out 75% of the rest of them, they could target that in a heartbeat. And just like saying, I mean, you can pinpoint a bomb to go through a window. You can do the same thing with an EMP. You can be very directional. Probably not as, that is one of the difficulties. And you would have to be very sophisticated to be able to do that in the Northeast. I don't think Iran or North Korea could do it, but maybe China or Russia could do it. They could get close enough, then they can do enough. They could do enough of it so that they could wipe out most of the EMPs.
And that's correct. We studied it when I was flying and we did a nuclear mission. 100,000 megaton bomb at, say, about 20, 30 miles up before it really gets into the atmosphere. It would wipe out half of the United States.
Sounds like Mad Max.
It wasn't my intention to make anybody scared or depressed. But I knew I'd make it mad when I told you how little it would take to harden the grid and save us all. That is the maddening thing. And that's really where you need to get a hold of your senators and your congressmen. I got a hold of Burchett when he was here and addressed it, but it's got to be done. It's got to be done.
Are you available for children's groups?
We got one more question available for children.
Okay, go ahead.
If we were struck, could we retaliate? Would we be able to retaliate?
The question is, if we were struck, could we retaliate? The answer is, the good news is, most of the military is hardened. So I guess the answer would be, yes, we probably could retaliate, but the damage would be done. I mean, so you can blow somebody up that did you damage, but then you've got 1.5 to 2 years of trying to repair the grid and get electricity back. So, yeah. Right, exactly. So, anyway. Thank you so much.
Well, that sounds pretty good. We will have you back for an explanation of how we can protect ourselves. That's not a problem. We have speakers scheduled up through June of this year. And
You have a cancellation?
okay, well, that'd be great. And that happens like this last time. We're supposed to have Mayor of Knoxville here for the next meeting, but he had to cancel because they moved his council meeting on our Tea Party meeting date. So he'll be coming in June is when we're going to have him. And I need to get back there. In just a second. Okay. As I said, we have guest speakers. Before I do that, Acro America is going to be meeting this coming Thursday, February 28th. It's going to be this coming Thursday, but February 28th. And speaker will be Katie Wellman, sharing enlightenment on the third chapter of Bridget's book, which is The Rise. And she'll be talking about peaceful majority. So if anybody's interested in that, be glad to, or they'll be glad to have you come. One of the other things that happened at the meeting we went to was we got a chance to hear a couple of really good speakers. One of is David Galglass. I don't know whether you've ever heard of him. He actually went undercover in the Muslim Mafia in the CARE organization for the United States government, and this is a book about his adventures in that. He will be our next guest speaker. He's really, really good, and he'll tell you about all the things that went on in the mafia. So that'll be good. And then we're going to have a raffle for the books. So, Katie,
on, Katie, come on.
Okay, what's going to happen is you can, the first one will be able to go up and pick the book that they like. I'm just going to read the last 4 digits, which is 3737. 3737, okay. And I've got 4 more here. Okay, so let him go and pick the book that he likes. Next one will be 3759. 3759. Okay. Laura's going to get the next book.
That is unbelievable.
It's rigged.
It's rigged, yeah. Okay, next one is 3753. Okay, we'll go get your book. You're the third in line to pick. And the next one is 3727. 3727.
3727.
Correct. No, you only get one book.
Draw that.
No, we'll draw another one. And 3735.
Whoa, 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 hey,
Okay, give me one more.
I just turned it back in.
Yeah, pull both.
Either one's fine.
That's happened more than once. Okay, the next one is 3746. 3746, okay.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Okay, I see we got a lot of people that are wearing their mega hats, and if you don't have one, you ought to go get one. Wear it around town. We just bought 2 new ones, and they've got all kinds of colors now besides red. So, I want to thank you for coming. If you have any questions, please come up and see me or one of the group that's here at the leadership table, and we'd be glad to answer any questions you have. Hope to see you for the next meeting.
That was a safe extra doing
I know how to drive here. Barely. See, that's the thing I was doing. That I thought, maybe it's not gonna be in a real hurry to. How are you? Well, good to see you, my friend. You have some money for me? I used to run the biggest store in New Jersey back in the early 70s. I could basically have anything I want. I still got experience from back then. That's where I see somebody. No, I don't see the thing. I'll get misfires with that. I got 5,000 round cases. I don't. Yeah, whatever signature you want, going on, whatever you can do in line. Take care, you guys.
Did you or did you